Ayrton Senna was the conductor of a symphony of engines. He was a conductor, soloist and composer of a winding track in which all the obstacles, encounters, mistakes, successes, victories and contradictions that make up a hero's journey are outlined. This is his journey. At the start of the 60s, the Da Silva family was well established in the sprawling city of Sao Paulo and was comfortably well off. They did not live in the opulent and arrogant splendour of a small and favoured elite, but their situation was secure thanks to determination and hard work. The house was comfortable and admittedly a palace by the standards of those who lived in the favelas, but it was a shack compared to those elites sitting on their colossal fortunes. Married to Naide Joanna Senna, Milton Gorado da Silva started on the bottom rung of the ladder and was a self-made man. From relatively poor beginnings, he started off by driving other people. He was a chauffeur. Then, he set up a small automobile spare parts business, which began to flourish at the end of the 50s. He was a man with strict moral values and his feet firmly on the ground. For him, getting rich was not a goal in itself. Achieving wealth took hard work and there was no room for daydreaming. Nevertheless, he was very proud of the fact that his family was well provided for. Milton and Naide had 3 children, a daughter Viviane in 1957, then 2 sons, Ayrton in 1960 and Leonardo in 1966. Naide came from a Brazilian middle-class background and spent all her time looking after her children, and she was very close to all of them. Viviane recalled that the young Ayrton was a bundle of energy, which often led to cuts and bruises, which worried his mother, who always wanted to pack him off to the doctor. He simply needed an outlet for his energies, and it was his father who found it for him, noting Ayrton's interest in the dashboard of the family car as he mimicked every action required to keep a car in motion. Milton da Silva was interested in motorised sports and gave his lad a little Jeep pedal car. Then more significantly, a kart with a real little engine which backfired and brakes which just about slowed it down. Ayrton was only 4 at the time. In 1964, karting was still in its infancy and not well established in the public's imagination. As far as Milton was concerned, the gift of the little kart was nothing more than a way of channeling Ayrton's energies in a direction to which he already seemed drawn. Indeed, Ayrton would spend many a happy hour dashing down the slope alongside the family home, braking hard before turning round and heading once again for the top before starting all over again. As the child got older and went to school, the rules of engagement were outlined by the father. Okay for the karting, but like all rewards, it had to be worked for. Ayrton's report cards would decide. During his entire time at school, Ayrton never shone in the classroom. Generally impatient, homework would usually be consigned to the last 10 minutes before going out. Intelligent and intuitive, he always knew how to get away with the minimum asked for. to avoid getting in any trouble, such as not being allowed to drive his kart, for example. In 1970, the boy started at the Colegio Rio Branco, a strict and Spartan private school where, according to the recollections of his teachers, who liked him nevertheless, he acquitted himself no better than he had done in the past. He was a nice boy, not without charm, but his mind was on other things. That first kart no longer satisfied his needs. He had dismantled it dozens of times, analysing the engine and its performance, and explained to his puzzled father that he needed something more powerful. As his schoolwork was more or less to the required standard, Milton gave in. Fitted with an engine which matched his aspirations, Ayrton spent every moment of his free time charging round the tarmac at the Interlagos kart track, which was only 3/4 of an hour away from his home. The track was not far from the circuit which would soon be home to the Formula 1 Grand Prix. It was pretty basic, as were all kart tracks of that era. In the afternoon, after school, and at the weekends, Ayrton's time was devoted to this all-consuming passion. The young Ayrton engaged in a tireless quest for performance and made sure he was fully au fait with the mechanical side. According to those who knew him at the time, he already knew everything about braking. He never stopped dismantling the calipers and the little disc while fine-tuning the movements of the brake pedal. With several engines and carburetors, he tried every single permutation, comparing compressors, ratios and the jets in the carburetors. He would never settle for less than perfection. It rains often in Sao Paulo, and, at first, he was not particularly skilled in these conditions. Wanting to learn and understand, Ayrton therefore took the decision that every time the heavens opened, he would get out in his kart and would run for hours in the rain, until dusk brought him a halt where he could no longer see his feet in front of him. This total commitment to mastering a subject which he felt eluded him would crop up again on numerous occasions and would be one of the building blocks of his later career as a legendary driver. Senna was already showing himself to be relentless in his pursuit of a solution to whatever problem stood in his way. Nothing could be left to chance, and no detail of engine tuning or chassis setup could be ignored. Lucio Pascual Gascon, known as Teche, knew he had a customer who was out of the ordinary. Once Milton da Silva realised that his son could only talk of nuts and bolts, he realised that this talent, if that's what it really was, had to be exploited correctly. As a pragmatic man and an attentive father, he wanted his son to succeed, but with the best chance possible. So he made his own discreet inquiries about racing and how to find the ideal mechanic to prepare and run the kart. His inquiries came up with the name of Teche, whom he contacted immediately about looking after his son. Originally Spanish, Gascon had come to Brazil 25 years earlier and was the top man in local karting circles, whose school had seen the lights of Fittipaldi and Pache pass through his doors. From the very beginning, Gascon would be a privileged witness to the fantastic ascent of the young Paulista. On the 1st of July 1973, Ayrton da Silva, this being the family name under which he raced for some time, was at the Interlagos karting track with his chassis number 42. He had been there since 6 in the morning to be sure of leaving nothing to chance. Having taken part in several friendly races, this was his first official event, as Brazilian law forbade drivers to compete under the age of 13. He dominated the event and took the checkered flag, waved of course by Gascon himself. Lucio Pascual Gascon took several days to think about it, but made up his mind. He wanted to look after and train this little marvel, and said yes to Milton da Silva. There would be total complicity between this rough and ready Spaniard and the skinny Brazilian for the next 3 years, and their friendship never waned. Ayrton read the specialist magazines, the results from Europe, and learnt about the performance of the various engines and chassis, ordering the best to be sent to Brazil. Gascon did the preparation. Armed with a driver and a truck, transformed into a mobile workshop provided by Ayrton's father, the two of them travelled the country competing in ever more important races. With every passing day, Ayrton revealed more and more skill at the wheel and spent ages discussing technical matters with his mentor, who never tired listening to the young prodigy. At the start of 1974, Ayrton won the important title of Champion of Sao Paulo in the junior category, and the following year he was runner-up in the Brazilian series. In 1976 he moved up to the 100cc category. His controlled sliding technique was drawing more and more admirers. Ayrton decided, in consultation with Gascon and his father, to go to the Inter category, the International South American Championship. The Inter category is vitally important for any young karting ace. It's like stepping into the big kids' playground, the final stage. What does one do when one has won everything in karts, as one is too old to fend off the young chargers coming up from behind? Ayrton did not seem to ask himself that question. All his energies were directed at one day becoming karting world champion. In 1977, Ayrton contested the classic national events in his new category, instantly racking up good results. In fact, these races were mere rehearsals for the main event, which took place in San Jose in Uruguay. He left Brazil for the first time. It was an important step, as the South American Championship represented the first step towards global recognition. It was a high-class entry, even if it was not a patch on what could be found in Europe. But Ayrton was not concerned about that. He dominated the event, eventually walking off with the coveted title. From now on, he was on the road to success, which would lead to the great wide world. This title was actually no more than a stepping stone to the supreme crown of world champion, to which he would devote himself for the next 3 years. It would be the only title to elude him. Aware of the fact that the karting elite and the professionals were all in Europe, Ayrton did not need convincing to accept an offer from the Brazilian Federation to head for the old continent, along with the country's other top drivers, to the 1978 World Championship held at Le Mans. But this would require better equipment, and, at the time, the Italians were noted for their expertise in this area. Milton da Silva contacted the Parilla brothers, who ran the DAP, the Angelo Parilla, firm, named after their father, who invented the famous rotary valve on 2-stroke engines, still the ultimate in international karting. Honoured to be approached by the family of the South American champion, as Ayrton had just won that year's Inter title in Brazil. Achille and Angelo Parilla reached an agreement with Milton to test the equipment in Italy prior to the World Championship. Arriving for the first time in Europe, Ayrton was taken to the Parma Pancrazio circuit and met up with the Italian team and their machines. Right from his very first laps, it was obvious to all the observers that they were watching something a bit special. His driving style impressed, and soon the young maestro's times showed the true story. Ayrton was already lapping as quickly as the works driver, Ireland's Terry Fulerton, who was there as an incredulous witness. Fulerton was not just anybody, he was world champion in 1973, and despite his advancing years, he was 28. He was also there to prepare for the World Championships. Totally convinced by this demonstration, the Parilla brothers offered Ayrton a works contract as number 2 to Fulerton. He would not be paid, but he would get the best equipment he had ever used. Ayrton then spent 2 weeks testing intensively, going through the chassis, engines and tyres. It was a laborious task, but vital in that finding the best engine from a batch and the right tyres is an empirical science, and only the very best drivers have sufficient feeling to sense any hesitation in an engine or carburettor. Competition between these future champions is extremely close, with places on a karting grid often split by just thousandths of a second. Testing late into the night was a great way for a driver to get the hang of what was involved. The big day arrived. Ayrton met up with his fellow countrymen on the 11th of September 1978 in the Le Mans paddock, with its karting track inside the 24-hour circuit. He was also delighted to find Gascon, who had made the trip to support his young charger. Let go by Milton, Gascon no longer had a technical role in the operation, but he was there to act as a reassuring translator for the young man whose command of Italian was not yet good enough to converse with the Italian mechanics from DAP. For the European spectators, it was their first sighting of the yellow helmet with green and blue stripes as it whizzed around the track. He only just missed out on pole, which went to Fulerton. But he had made his mark, and his excellent showing in the pre-finals meant that he was immediately considered a favourite for the main event. Unfortunately, a collision, due to a lack of experience, ruined any hopes of victory, and he finished 6th. It was a flattering result for a first attempt, but of course Ayrton was not happy with it. He wanted to win, and swore he would do it one day. He knew that all this, the karts, the racing, would soon have to end. It was a family rule that work takes precedence. He was the eldest of the Senna da Silva sons, and as such, at some point, he would have to take over from Milton. The father had never thought otherwise, and he regarded the karting merely as a hobby. He had encouraged his son, believing that high-level competition was character building and would help when it came to running a large company like his. But once the World Championship had been reached and the follies of youth had passed, it would be time to think of getting back to the real world. There was friction between Milton and Gascon, as it would seem, that regarded karting. Milton regarded karting as one of the activities his son happened to pursue en route to the responsibility of the family business, and his son Ayrton regarded karting as something else altogether. More than that, karting can swallow a great deal of money, and it may well be that Milton saw this with great clarity. Conversely, Gascon, so steeped in the importance of karting, could not understand why anybody else could not grasp that importance. To him, karting was life, and between them stood Ayrton. Gascoigne claims that Milton didn't want to spend money on the karting, and also claims that one-time words between father and son became so high that he stepped in between them. According to Gascoigne, father and son fell out over the matter of payment to Gascoigne. This reportedly resulted in Ayrton retreating to a farm in the middle of Brazil and staying there for 45 days. Despite this, the young champion dispensed all his energies and means to be as ready as possible for the 1979 World Championship. He went to Brazil and, apart from a few haphazard courses in business studies at the University of Sao Paulo, he spent almost all his time at improving and testing all possible permutations of chassis and engine under the watchful eye of Gascoigne. Ayrton flew to Portugal in September to the little seaside town of Estoril, which was hosting the World Championship. Unlike the previous year at Le Mans, this time he turned up at the racetrack as the favourite. The DAP team was made up of the ever-present Terry Fulerton and a new driver, Dutchman Peter Cohen. Despite coming together with Fulerton in qualifying, Ayrton did an excellent time, and his biggest threat now appeared to come from Cohen. The start of the final was the scene of much confusion, which was down to the organisers, and tensions grew on the grid as the time ticked by. Ayrton did not flinch, did not speak. He stayed in his kart, concentrating hard on what had to be the race of his life. It was an attitude which would be noted time and again later in his single-seat career, reflecting the ability to cut himself off from the outside world, something rarely seen in his contemporaries at that time. The pack was finally released, and the yellow helmet gradually disappeared into the distance, as Ayrton thrilled the crowd with his unique style, often sliding for long distances, sometimes steering with just one hand while the other fiddled with the carburettor. Ayrton reigned supreme and led as he pleased. The laps ticked by, and eventually he was shown the number one as he passed in front of the signalling area. Only one lap between him and total happiness. Another 1,100 metres and he would take the checkered flag. Arms held aloft as he received a grand ovation. He is world champion. But as dusk fell on the circuit, the drivers stepped up onto the podium. A beaming Peter Cohen jumped onto the top step, and a sulking Ayrton was only second. In those days, the final result was based on the classification of the three finals. With Ayrton and Peter on level pegging, the performance in qualifying was taken into account, and in this instance, the Dutchman had done better. Ayrton could not cope with this mathematical solution. He won on the track and could not deal with the injustice of it all. He would never admit it, and it would remain one of the two biggest disappointments of his career, the other being his second place in the 1984 Formula One Monaco Grand Prix. His obsession with being the best in the world would relegate everything else to second place. In 1980, the fact he was champion of both Brazil and South America brought him little satisfaction for just a short space of time. Ayrton is already looking to single-seaters and knows that karting is almost over. Win this collector's edition's Ayrton Senna official photo book. When we reach 113 comments, the best comment will be chosen. Comment on the video and how Ayrton inspired you in your life.